Hi, I'm Urvashi from TwoSleevers.com. That's my blog, and today I'm going to talk to you about the principles of adapting a recipe for an Instant Pot. So let's say you have a recipe for a stovetop or an oven or something. People are always asking about how to adapt a recipe, and the better way to do this is to understand the principles behind it. So there's a series, this is going to be a series of 4 videos. I'm going to cut them short so you can decide which ones you want to listen to. But essentially we're going to talk about 4 points. One is how is pressure cooking different? So what are some of the changes that happen when you cook inside a pressure cooker? What does that mean? Those changes, what do they mean for the typical adjustments that you need? How would you adapt a recipe that's made for something else? And then I'm going to walk you through a sample. So in this video I'm going to talk about how pressure cooking is different. Some of this is going to sound obvious, but when you look at the implications, it will make a little bit more sense as to why I chose these. So the first thing that's going to happen in a pressure cooker is you're going to have less water evaporating. It's a contained environment. All the water that you put in is going to stay in, but then all the water that the vegetables and meat and everything else releases is also going to stay in. So obviously you can start to think about the implications of that. You're going to end up with more water than you started, unless you have starchy things like pasta or beans or potatoes in there. So because one of the main changes that's going to happen as you think about adapting a recipe is the water is going to stay in. However, the paradox is everything needs a certain amount of water to cook. So you need to have at least a fourth of a cup of water in it. And then when the meats and vegetables release water, you need about somewhere between 3/4 to 1 cup for the pot to come to pressure. So what that means is you can't do dishes that have absolutely no water that's going to be released from that dish. So you can't make dry dishes as an example. The faster cook times are the biggest advantage, but also the area where you will have to adapt your recipe the most. And in the next videos, I'm going to talk about how you can think about adapting some of those times. The other thing to consider is that things cook at different time periods. So in a slow cooker, for example, you can put meats and vegetables in at the same time and you can expect them to cook at the same time. That will not work in a pressure cooker. What's going to happen is things that are less dense, like vegetables or meat or seafood, shrimp, are going to cook at a very, very different pace from dense meats like pork or chicken or beef, etc. So you can't cook things at the same time unless they take the same cook time. The other thing to be very, very careful about in a pressure cooker is you cannot have it scorch at all. So when you're cooking on a stovetop, for example, you can have dishes that leave a fond at the end of it. And that fond is a good thing. It's got a lot of flavor. If you watch the video about the Maillard reaction, you'll see how some of those things are deliberately cultivated in a stovetop. You cannot have those in a pressure cooker because the good pressure cookers will stop themselves. So if it scorches at all, as a safety measure, it will shut itself off. So you need to be really careful about that. And then the other thing to be aware of is that foods don't always act the same under pressure. So you know how alcohol will evaporate on a stovetop? It won't necessarily in a pressure cooker. Peppers, things that are spicy, sometimes the heat may intensify if you're doing a concoction. And the main thing that comes up quite often is that dairy will curdle. So if you're cooking with yogurt or if you're cooking with milk, now sometimes honestly you want it to curdle, you want it to separate. So if you're making an Indian style dessert, you want that separation. So you want the milk solids to be extracted. But most of the times that's not a desirable thing. So what I found in my experience is that dairy curdles and cans of coconut milk don't always do as well under pressure as you would like. So these things are why you need to adapt recipes. So just to recap real quick, there's less water is going to be evaporated. You can't cook dishes that are dry. You cannot afford for things to scorch. You have to be cognizant of the fact that different things cook under different time periods in a pressure cooker. Meats and vegetables won't cook at the same time. And then the last thing you need to be aware of is that certain commonly used foods like alcohol, coconut milk, dairy, etc. do curdle. So that is why when you start to adapt a recipe, you've got to be able to think through all of those. So that's a very quick overview on what makes it different. And the next video I'm going to talk about is because of these differences, what are the implications? What are the typical adjustments that you would need? I'm Urvashi from TwoSleevers, and I hope that first video was helpful, and stay tuned to watch the second one.